Mars, the red planet, the fourth rock from the sun.
The act of bringing Matt Damon home is something that brings the entire humanity together.
I think I'm gonna cry now.
Greetings, Earthlings. Welcome to the Flick Lab. We take you on a bi-weekly journey via films. We're focusing on international cinema. Today's episode will be discussing the movies made about the planet Mars from the last 111 years. And in the process, we'll explore how the depiction of Mars has changed in cinema during this time. Currently, we are a hosting team of 3 people now. I'm Karri, a Finn living in Malaga, Spain. I'm a media assistant by education and work in IT.
I'm Henrik, a Finn living in Äänekoski, Finland.
And I'm Zach. I'm an American living in Boston. I have a bachelor's in radio, television, and film, and a master's in public policy.
Zach is our new member, and it's your 3rd episode with us. And, well,
I'm no longer a virgin.
Yeah, well, is your husband jealous yet that you are talking online with 2 handsome Finnish guys? Hours upon hours.
He is, and whenever I talk to those 2 handsome Finnish guys on the other podcasts that I do, he does get really jealous when I do that.
Seeing how we are talking about Finnish guys, I have to call bullshit.
Excuse me. Aren't we handsome, Henrik?
Well, I'm not making that statement on behalf of either one of us.
Oh, come on. Mars, the red planet, the fourth rock from the sun. So, I've been always interested on a layman level in the astronomy, and I've found Mars fascinating for quite some time. I followed the Spirit and Opportunity rover launches in 2003, and the Phoenix lander in 2008, and now the Perseverance rover is on Mars, doing some more advanced science. Some background about Mars, I guess. So the red color of Mars, it's thanks to the iron oxide, making the surface rusty. It has a thin atmosphere. It's so thin that the atmospheric pressure would crush you, Henrik, in seconds or minutes. And the Martian year is much longer than on Earth, about twice the Earth year, 687 days. Length of the seasons varies due to the orbital eccentricity, and the length of the days is almost the same though. The workaholics will love Mars because they will have their precious extra hour in their day, as the day is about 25 hours long. Temperatures can range from the pleasant 21 Celsius to the freezing cold, minus 142 Celsius. It's not really a walk in the park or any kind of a beach party or volleyball game anytime soon, because the radiation from the sun comes through without much trouble, and there's not enough atmosphere to keep the radiation at bay or magnetic fields.
So while I'm playing volleyball, I'm going to get a hell of a suntan.
Oh yes, wouldn't want to see that one. The eventual Mars colony will not be a long-term settlement, at least not now. Maybe when we once someday terraform it, maybe. The travelers who are sent there will be on Mars science missions, and the people will be rotated in and out of the planet because of the psychologically and physically taxing environment. You just have to be inside pressurized domes all the time. Can't really spend that time outside too much. The surface gravity is less than 1/3 of the Earth's, and it's unclear what will be the long-term consequences of such an environment. Well, we know that when we are on Earth orbit, in the free fall gravity level. It will have negative consequences on the bone density, cardiovascular health, vision, and cancer rates, and more.
But on the plus side, I will be a svelte 130 pounds, and I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, yeah. Now imagine this 6 to 9 month trip to Mars in weightlessness, where you're hopefully avoiding dangerous space radiation, and then landing on Mars and then starting your ground mission, where you fight the Martian gravity and learn to walk again, and then spending there, let's say, 6 months, then returning to weightlessness again on the spaceship return mission, hopefully. For now, at least personally, I think it's gonna be better to just have or think of it as a one-way mission, which could be deadly, but what you gonna do? So you have the returning trip weightlessness for 6 to 9 months, and then you return back to Earth gravity. This will have some kind of interesting consequences to human health. But we're gonna do it anyway. There are polar caps, valleys, and old riverbeds, kind of Earth-like. And the lower gravity results in less steep landscapes. For example, take the Olympus Mons, the largest volcano and the highest mountain that we know, a planetary mountain in the entire solar system. So it's about 2.5 times higher than Mount Everest. But here's a fascinating thing for you guys. Say that you were on the top of the mountain right now. You most likely would not see that you're on top of the mountain when you're there, because it is incredibly flat. And the mountain is about the size of the entire country, France. So whether you were at the top or the bottom, you would not even realize where it ends. Unlike in gay sex.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Me neither. But obviously there wasn't really virtually any science on Mars back in 1910, where we start our movie journey tonight. The planet had only been peaked with telescopes, and you could see only some surface features and then make wrong assumptions from those features. We thought there were canals and water and maybe some alien civilization and structures. It was only in the 1970s when any useful data really started to pour in with the Viking landers from NASA. So before the 1970s, you could get away with all kinds of absurd fantasy depictions of Mars or Martians. There was nothing to prove you really otherwise. If you'd do these kind of stories now that you see from the 1910s movies, for example, there's a chance that people wouldn't care about such fantasies of native Martian populations roaming around, because the stories would be anchored on this planet that we already know, that is desolate and pretty barren, and no green aliens there, or grey for that matter.
I don't know. If you go with today's film's lineup, spoiler, you actually find out that people are still quite thirsty still for, your grey Martians, or some type of idea of something actually living on the planet.
Which is a bit of a problem for me when watching these films. But to support my assumption, there's a steep drop in Mars-related films in the 70s and 80s. After the 60s, we have to jump to the 80s, late 80s, to find anything Mars-related that I would know of. And then the 90s films, they start to come back with this new Mars boom. There's, I guess, a renewed public interest in the Martian microbial life and the ideas of human colonization of Mars, as seen in Total Recall from 1990 and Red Planet 2000 and some others. But yeah, Mars movies have been historically kind of weak performing at the box office. For example, Mission to Mars, The Red Planet, these two films that were dumped on the same year, 2000. And then The Last Days on Mars from 2013. Notable flops, like brutal flops, at least the last one here.
Although, to be absolutely honest, there might be other reasons why those films flopped. Not just the fact that, Mars wouldn't attract eyeballs.
Could be distribution or who knows.
Could be, simply put, quality.
Okay, any kind of overview of the Martian movies in general? Like what has been released out there?
Well, that's actually quite a long one.
That is quite a long list. There are at least 30 to 35 Martian films that I'm aware of. Starting from 1910, the latest from 2018, I guess, this 2036 Origin Unknown film. These are varying shapes and sizes of films. There's short films, there's just downright fantasy, there's animation, there's some kind of a more serious science takes, then there is the notorious 50s and 60s B movies.
It depends a hell of a lot about the B movie in question. Not necessarily as a genre, but B movies easily get lumped too easily with trash, under the sentiment that no artistic or ideological values were present in making of the film, and nothing worth of theme or idea is to be seen in B movies, and that kinda is just your average typical Hollywood elitism, which doesn't really have bearing in reality.
Yeah, these are bottom line movies, trying to make the easy bucks at the box office. Artistic quality is secondary, usually.
Well, once again, it depends on the B movie.
You're such a contrarian, Henrik.
What? I can't help it. I mean, fucking James Cameron got his start in making B movies, and everyone who has seen like the first ones can actually detest that even in those there was an artistic identity and artistic idea, and there was also some kind of a thematic idea going on.
What am I supposed to detest?
I don't know. Not B movies, if you ask me.
Okay, maybe I heard you wrong. Anyway, I guess the first one of the evening falls on me. So the idea here is to look for what kind of a science-based ideas have been presented in these movies, and how realistic they might be, how plausible they might be in the future, how we can reflect them on what we know now, things like that. And the story seems to start with A Trip to Mars from 1910. It's kind of the one that started it all. It's a short film. Did you guys watch it?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, the first known Mars film to us, the first American sci-fi film as well, it's been argued. It's a Thomas Edison production and done around the time when the world was moving away from this George Méliès type of sci-fi spectacles and gimmicks, and moving on to serious historical reenactments such as D.W. Griffith's A Birth of a Nation. Is this now a third episode in 2 months when I'm mentioning Griffith? God help us.
Yeah, I'm having like second thoughts about introducing you to the birth of a nation.
So this is all your fault, Henrik. I just want to make sure I'm clear.
It is. But since I'm all heart, if Karri really wants it and really asks for it, yeah, we can do a follow-up Griffith episode.
Well, hold that thought. This is a 4-minute short film directed by Ashley Miller, and that's all the credits that you get for regarding this film. We don't know who the actors are. But in the film, there's a professor or scientist of some kind who has discovered reverse gravity, and this of course means that you will float out of the Earth and onto Mars. Just like that, and this gravity switch will affect the professor only, and not the Earth or the other objects, because he drops the powder on himself, because he has created this gravity-altering powder or powder mix, and he drops it on different items, and they start floating in his lab. And the professor can be seen doing kind of what looks like a river dance for celebration. Yay! So he floats to Mars and faces some kind of a half-tree, half-human type of creatures, and then realizes that he's not that he is not maybe in a safe place. There's kind of these giant faces. One of them puffs the poor professor into the air, and he lands on the palm of a giant goblin of sorts. And then the goblin then puffs cold air and makes snowballs out of the professor. And then he burns the snowball, and then it apparently explodes or something happens, which makes the professor to eject out of Mars and back to his lab directly. Then I don't know what kind of a stroke of genius is happening here, but he appears to purposely throw the powder mix on on the floor, and then this causes the entire house to lift off to the skies. And I gotta hand it to the film. The special effects are pretty impressive for a 1910 film. Different effects used, stop-action substitution to replace objects, primitive stop-motion trick to make the snowball, and rear projection for scaling. But regarding Mars, let's concentrate on that. So this is way before the Viking landers' science dump, so we see anthropomorphic giant Martians as kind of a tree type of humanoid figures. We see no concerns about the atmosphere of Mars. It's depicted as breathable and Earth-like. Was the movie made with any kind of a serious intent? What do you think, guys?
I wouldn't say a serious intent. I definitely think this is just a bit of fun. I think this is fanciful. That is not a word. Fanciful. This is play. Especially in 1910, when filmmaking was really in its infancy. And I think a lot of filmmakers, George Méliès and the like, it was really about just what kind of fun shit can we do with this? And isn't it really cool that we can do these things like rear projection and these, like you said, these sort of very primitive stop motion animations to make it look like I'm being held in the palm of some giant goblin? Isn't that fucking cool? And it was, and it still sort of is. So yeah, I think this is just a good time.
Yeah, Henrik, as I think you are a fan of science fiction, what do you think? Is this reflecting any kind of a sci-fi literature of the time? Any thoughts?
Well, yeah, no. The closest kind of comparison perhaps that you could draw from the film, and even this is somewhat stretching it, I would place the closest comparison to Jules Verne.
Yeah.
Who as an author, dealt a hell of a lot with the fantastical, and you can make the argument that Verne's books were more fantasy than like real science fiction, or science fiction with any real science in it, because most of Verne's scenarios were of such quality that they were not actually doable during Verne's time, and because of that, it kind of lent Verne the ability to so to say reach for the stars with his imagination. But Verne still very much tried to think his scenarios through. The success rate is something that we can all debate about, but he did kind of try. He did try to think the scenarios through with enough logic and reason as to not like go completely out of the window with plausibility. At least but not by the standards of his time. And that's something that kind of does not, on the other hand, appear on the first like sci-fi films. Like, for example, the film in question now, where basically the whole Mars is reached through by some kind of a anti-gravitation powder. Like So and that's kind of, you end up in this mixed up hodgepodge situation where certainly, a researcher reaching Mars and finding out that Mars is inhabited by some type of humanoid beings. That, of course, is something that very much can exist or could exist in Verne's books, but the whole anti-gravitation powder, that's just too fantastical even to Jules Verne.
Yeah, the whole premise of this powder is rather bonkers, but yeah, it's hard to take any of the film really seriously. If I had to take a guess, it was just one of the many Méliès-esque Edison films, which was trying to cash on the cinema as a kind of a freak show invention, as a new invention.
Then again, as today's lineup moves forward, and we get deeper into the all the films that we have watched for today's episode, it kind of, movie by movie and decade after decade, it starts to become more obvious that when it comes to kind of the filmmakers being pro Mars, that's a sentiment that mostly exists in these older films. Like in these movies, the Mars is still essentially for Martians, and as the cinema kind of moves forward, and at least in some degree, in some capacity, becomes more realistic, the sentiment behind the films also start to change, and it becomes more and more like anti-Mars and pro-human.
All right, so we're gonna now talk about A Trip to Mars. Again! What? Yeah, it's a film from 1918, also named A Trip to Mars, but the original title is Himmelskibet. It's a Danish film. So, Himmelskibet, it translates to the skyship. This was made during the Mars fever era, after the public interest was renewed on Mars because of new observations of Mars on Mars. And there was even writing that this was the beginning of space opera subgenre of sci-fi. This might be evident in the romanticized risk-taking space adventure and the chivalric love, interplanetary love. So it's gonna get fucking bonkers. So in the story we have a Navy captain who wants to kind of defy everyone's expectations and travel to Mars with this skyship. And kind of our antagonist, let's say, is aptly named Professor Dubious, written Dubius. Yeah, he is very much against the mission, but that's because he's just a jerk. He's butthurt that he didn't come up with the skyship himself, because he's been working all his life on the same thing, and then he cannot believe that, oh, how can you do something that I've been working all my life on it in just 2 years? Yep, they built a spaceship in 2 years. One of the lady friends of these people who go on this trip says, quote, "With this, our first kiss, I initiate you to your deed." Meaning that the lady friend gives a kiss and then they kind of take the departure on the mission. So the skyship, it's an interesting mix of kind of traditional airplane design and helicopter or a car. It can take off like a conventional airplane and then fly into outer space without any kind of a rocket propellant. It just flies there. And once it's in space, it appears to have artificial gravity, or just the lack of understanding of how gravity works. Well, we know that Isaac Newton understood gravity already in the 18th century, but he did the laws of motion and the universal gravitation, but it's likely that we didn't understand gravity in space much. What do you think? How much did Newton know about gravity in space? Yeah, I think we didn't understand gravity in space, or indeed everywhere, as a kind of a force around us until Albert Einstein joined the party in 1915 when he published the theory of general relativity. And well, if nothing else, this is at the latest the confirmation to us that how mass would behave in space. I would say that the makers didn't intend this film to be taken too seriously either. I would also say that they had not read Theory of Relativity either. It had not been finalized as a paper until 1916, and this film came out in 1918. But yeah, something else to be aware of is the aerodynamics in the time they were in their infancy when the film was made. It was just a few years earlier in 1909 when the proto-versions of modern airplane started to take their shape. And yeah, there are some science claims. We would not be the Flick Lab if we would not address the science claims. So, okay, after this I'm done with this film, I hope. So, I did some math, or I didn't, the computer did. So, the travel distance from Earth to Mars at the closest approach is about 56 million kilometers. So, the Himmelskibbe claims to navigate through space with the speed of 12,000 kilometers per hour. And the trip takes them about half a year. A beeline trip would take about 194 days. But you can never take a beeline trip because the planet would just zip right past you. You have to start the flight before the closest approach and then you arrive after the closest approach. So let's take NASA's Perseverance rover spacecraft as an example for this. The trip was 480 million kilometers, and it departed Earth with the speed of about 39,600 kilometers per hour. So let's pretend, for the sake of the argument, that Himmelskibbe would have the same distance to Mars, 480 million kilometers, right? And the mentioned speed was 12,000 kilometers. It would not take them the claimed 6 months for the trip, but 4.5 years. So with this claim that the movie is giving us, we just have to assume that Mars is now frozen in position on its orbit, and that Himmelskibbe is just flying the 6 months that way. Yeah. And when they're about to reach Mars, there's one astronaut that says that they're advancing 10 times the normal speed. Nobody knows why, they just are. Maybe it's the gravitational pull of the planet, who knows. And yeah, Martians are depicted as human-like. They are kind of hippies. They have gotten rid of all kinds of violence, and they are therefore the more advanced civilization. Pretty much. Pretty lazy imagination, once again, I would say. It takes somewhat seriously some of the inventions that were around the corner, but kind of the carbon copy presentation of humans, or the Martians as kind of human-like, it always feels very lazy to me. It would make sense maybe in a reverse panspermia situation where Earth life would travel to Mars within a comet or kind of asteroid, but like an actual human being, living, breathing human being inside that asteroid, and then crashing on Mars and then surviving that and starting to do some panspermia on the planet.
I was wondering how many episodes we were going to get through before the word panspermia was used, and I am so glad it was only 3. It's a great word.
Not to mention that also when it comes to the technologies around fuel and engines, they also have gone forward as time has passed. So most likely during 1910s, that both the fuel and the engine burning that fuel wouldn't be as like advanced as it is today, meaning that the travel time would be even longer. And also the fact that, well, the film obviously does not take into account the possibility of what is the effects of leaving Earth gravity entering the spatial atmosphere, and once again re-entering the Mars gravity, and how's that going to affect like the ship itself.
So we go from the escape velocity of ejaculation to talking about Mars. That's interesting. It happened pretty fast.
I'm so proud of us.
Yeah. Improvement. What's next? It would be Aelita, or however you pronounce that, from Henrik.
Well, the actually spoilers. Since you laid out that today we are going to watch or the topic is going to be exactly how scientifically Mars has been portrayed in films throughout history. Well, with Aelita, I can just spoil. I can just spoil the answer for the rest of the episode right here, right now. It sucks.
Wow.
It has sucked always. It will always suck. The depiction of Mars, scientifically speaking, is always off.
Yeah.
The closest that we get perhaps happened in 2015.
Yes, praise Lord.
And you know, even with that, well, that's the hardest sci-fi that you're going to ever get. Outside of that, every single film we are going to talk about today fails miserably, and that's actually summarizing, like when it comes to that question, how scientifically Mars has been being portrayed as a planet in movies. There you have it. There you have it. Episode over. I just did the entire episode for you guys. You're welcome.
It's the curse. Yeah, thank you. It's the curse of the Martian or Mars-related film. Somehow, most of them really suck hard. But let's talk how much is sucking involved in Aelita.
Well, once again, a deal it depends kind of exactly what the level of sucking we are looking at.
Yeah, I believe it involves like a princess from Mars who is able to see to the Earth's surface, and probably some romance happens, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, kinda, sorta, yup. Aelita, there really is not that much to talk about Aelita. Aelita was a Soviet film directed by Yakov Brochanov, who originally was kinda ousted from Soviet Union, but as Soviet Union was still finding its way to kind of define itself, Lenin decided that, for example, much in the same way as Americans have done it, a movie could be a tool to kind of express your ideas or the ideas of your institution, your system, and this kind of push to have Soviet filmmaking started. And at that point, Protasanov was allowed to come back to Soviet Union, and this time he, at least officially, he was hailed as one of the masters of film, of cinema. So it was kind of, Aelita was kind of a case of a once exiled director now hailed as a champion, and with that also facing the moment where he has to kind of prove himself. Aelita itself was given actually quite large budget, Soviet filmmaking speaking, even though Protasanov had to do some cuts from his most fantastic ideas, and it's very easily to be seen as a Soviet propaganda, but with the caveat that the film, either intentionally or unintentionally, also managed to have undertones that read too heartily as anti-Soviet to Soviet movie censors. And for quite some time, Aelita was, well, not exactly lost film, but perhaps forgotten film in Western territories.
All right, so some propaganda and more fantasy for you.
Yeah, Aelita perhaps, at least in our lineup today, it's teetering on the breaking point between, pro-Martian or pro-Mars and anti-Mars movies. Aelita already starts to exhibit the symptoms that the later films in the lineup very heavily endorse, which is, pro-Earth, pro-man, pro-human sentiment. But Aelita still is ready to let Mars, at least in some terms, just be Mars. Like when it comes to the more heavier colonialization, which is something that happens in Mars related cinema. Aelita is still what it's in the I would say middle ground. It's not so much that Mars itself is being colonialized, it's more that Mars as a system, as an institution, as a government or land is being colonialized. So there is, of course, keeping in tone with this being Soviet propaganda, it of course has the theme of presenting the Martians a better way of life, presenting them a better system, but it kind of it ties itself into that. And at the end of the day, and this is kind of reason why it's hard to even talk about Aelita as any kind of a Martian cinema, because the final twist of the movie is that none of it actually happened. It wasn't real. It's all the Mars shit was just a daydream.
God damn it.
Meaning that also when it comes to the ideological colonialization of Mars, that either didn't happen.
Yeah, don't do that. Never do that dream trick. Alright, would it be War of the Worlds from Zach? Original one.
So, like many people, I have known about the War of the Worlds, mostly from the infamous broadcast from 1938, 1939. And, there's at this point, I guess they're urban legends that people were committing suicide and jumping out of buildings because they were so terrified that aliens actually were landing in New Jersey. I think those are probably apocryphal than real, but that was sort of my understanding of the War of the Worlds. And of course I had seen the Spielberg Tom Cruise version from 2005. But this was my first time watching the first film adaptation from 1953. And it's very 1953. It is very American cinema 1950s. The 1950s in America were this idyllic time post-World War II. This was the establishing of the middle class, and everyone was buying houses and popping out babies. And this was, I guess if you could find some people in America who would say that was when America was quote-unquote great. And that they want to make America great again. We're just going to ignore the fact that women didn't have a hell of a whole lot of rights, nor the black people or any particular people of color or any queer people. We're going to ignore all that and say that it was idyllic and it was perfect and beautiful.
Perhaps that's precisely the reason why America was great.
You know what, Henrik? I think you might be right. I think that's why they love it then.
I don't have a degree in psychology, but I could believe that's the sentiment. That's the level of intention and intelligence that we are riding here.
So yeah, so it's interesting that this is the setting to take this this story, which was originally written by H.G. Wells at the late part of the 19th century. Where in the original story it takes place just outside of London at the end of the 19th century, and where this one is taking place in the middle of the 20th century, and it's taking place outside Los Angeles as opposed to London. It's interesting that I'll tell you the most surprising thing. The couple that we meet, this man and woman that are going to be sort of who we follow through this tale, and we are supposed to care about them when they're in danger. It's the 1950s, so make some assumptions. So the man is a scientist, and then the woman gets introduced, and you'll never believe it, she has a master's degree in atomic and nuclear energy. Ooh. She's an educated woman. That's right, she is Sasha Fierce. She is ready to come up there and read you with her atomic knowledge. And I honestly was surprised. I couldn't believe that was a thing for 1953, that you had a woman with a master's degree in atomic energy. So I was like, okay, this film is going to be good. This is really ahead of its time. Well, that only lasted for another like 4.5 minutes. And then for the rest of the film, she is literally a bawling, this crying ball of emotional mess who has to be coddled and held. And don't worry, dear, everything will be fine. And she just screams and hollers the rest of the time and serves coffee in Danish to the soldiers. That's it. That's the end of her role.
Truly a masterpiece.
It's a masterpiece.
And master's degree put to good use.
Oh, I mean, serving that coffee in Danish, she did it masterfully with that master's degree. Oh, it was beautiful to watch. So other than misogyny aside, I think it holds pretty close to the novel, other than some of these changes in terms of setting. It's very science based. There's a lot of scientific jargon being thrown around. It isn't just like A Trip to Mars, the first film we talked about, where it's just sort of like, oh, Mars is going to be sort of a cool place. Let's do this because it's going to be cool. There's a lot of science being talked about. They talk about the effect of gravity on the bodies of the aliens. They talk about how they're probably have adapted with different senses, and they talk about evolutionary theory and how evolution on Mars must have changed the way that they have evolved to have different senses, and how they perceive the world is going to be different than the way that we have evolved. So it's very science-y in that way, which is then weird whenever later there's a priest that comes in and talks about how, well, if they're more advanced, that means they must be closer to the creator. And they all sing a hymn at the end of the film, which is it's an interesting dichotomy, that sort of mix of hard science and religion at the same time.
Right.
But that being said, I think it's very much of its time. The 1950s, when we had flight, had more advanced telescopes, we were seeing more of the planet Mars. We were sort of really getting into the science fiction era of filmmaking, and I think Mars was just the perfect way to rally on that, and to take a great book like War of the Worlds and say, let's make this into a film. You know, it's not the greatest thing, but it's pretty iconic, I think, for today's time. I mean, it's in the Criterion Collection now. I think because of its truly groundbreaking effects for 1953. They're pretty solid for 1953. I was quite impressed.
All right.
So yeah, that's War of the Worlds.
Well, the next one is not in the Criterion Collection, but it's definitely something of its time. Let me present to you The Angry Red Planet from 1959. So it's a curious case. It's one of those cheap sci-fi films from the era before space exploration properly kicked in, but yeah, it's a color picture though. With only a 200K budget, they were able to do this and apparently shoot it in 9 days. The director is again a Danish-born director, ep.133. Yeah, something like this. And so if this shooting schedule is really accurate, I'm quite impressed. There's a lot of set pieces and a lot of special effects used. There's this technique called cinemagic, which was used to create special effects on the Jeep, combining hand-drawn images and live-action footage. So cinemagic is just a fancy name for a Jeep fad that kind of withered and died after a few years. So, but in the story we have like a Martian space flight that was supposed to reach Mars, but all the contact with the spacecraft is lost. And they presume that all the astronauts are dead, but later the craft makes contact and is able to land safely back to Earth with the help of the mission control, and they land with a landing rocket before Elon Musk ever landed with a landing rocket. So 2 of the crew have survived and 2 have died. And one survivor has some mysterious green shit on his hand, which causes an infection. And the other lady survivor serves as the storyteller, story of their journey. And yeah, they are giving her some kind of a vaccine that makes her have a, well, total recall, to be frank. And they land on Mars, she explains, and she got traumatized after what she saw on the surface of Mars. There was a green Martian on the window, and she considered it being a quite ugly looking creature, and I think that's racist, interplanetary racist levels. Who are you to scream in terror in front of a window when you're making the first contact with Martian? That's kind of... Who are you to define the beauty standards of Martians or aliens?
Would that be... I feel like that would be speciesist.
Right. Let's go with that. Yeah, there's a mysterious force that surrounds their spacecraft, so they are unable to lift off after seeing this terrifying green monster, and so they decide to finally explore the outdoors after sitting in the spacecraft for a long time after landing. I don't know why, nobody's even looking out of the window. Apparently Mars is not very interesting to them. But finally they go outside, and there's a red tint to the planet. Seriously red tint. Everything is red, blood red, because they're using this strong red cinematic filter. So they explore, and this tint, by the way, it was an arduous process. Now it's just something that we throw on in After Effects when doing our kind of first editing in After Effects or in Windows Movie Maker. Not a big deal. But yeah, they meet some of the inhabitants of the planet. There's a carnivorous plant and a bat rat spider crab. And he is as big as a house. It's like, and then there is an amoeba-like creature in the lake, and the amoeba is about 100 or 1,000 times the size of a human, and it's also has spinning eyes, kind of reminiscent of a radar installation. And we get a glimpse of a city on the other side of the lake. They never reach that city. These seem to be high-rise buildings. So it's just left as a mystery what kind of inhabitants there would be. But yeah, they never get there because there's an aforementioned amoeba on their way. And they run into safety into the spacecraft. And the force field is now switched off somehow. And that's great because the aforementioned amoeba is consuming the spaceship around them, or surrounding it with some goo. And then there's an audio tape from the Martians, which have proceeded to speak English through radio to inform humans that if they ever return to the Red Planet, then the Earth would be destroyed as a retaliation. All right, it was quite of a ride. I feel that most depictions of Martian life really lack imagination. It's always Earth-like.
It's interesting. You said, they spoke English over the radio. So something I didn't touch on in 1953's War of the Worlds. They do the same thing. These aliens come out and, these men walk over and they try to speak English to them. They also try to other very human customs, like they try to wave a white flag to show that they're friendly. And I don't know if that was intended to show, oh yeah, these guys are idiots. Or if it was, oh no, like this is what we would do if we encountered beings from another planet. Were they intentionally being stupid, or is that just how do we think we can wave a white flag and that they'll understand that custom means I'm friendly or I'm surrendering?
Yeah, there's a lot of misunderstandings between Martian and Earth populations. I forgot to mention that in the 1918 film, A Trip to Mars, the idiot humans have brought guns to Mars, and then they take as an aggression the approaching Martians. Then they shoot down one, and that's not enough. They also throw a grenade. Anyway, yeah. So crossbred creatures is popular, such as this bat rat spider crab, but this monster was memorable to me, at least. Somebody made the kind of effort to give it all of the details of this bat, rat, and spider and crab, and that was creative, Henrik. I give it to this B movie. It is pretty freakish and features in some band's album cover as well. But the movie received mixed reviews. Regarding the space suits, they are not kind of needed, or they are. They use the helmet, but it doesn't seem to be providing any kind of atmospheric protection for them. There's no glass that I could see, any visor or anything like that. These look like standard issue motorcycle helmets, to be frank. And the person seems to be directly exposed to the atmosphere, so they would be crushed by Mars's atmosphere if this is the case. But of course, it's a movie, so it's a 1959 B-movie. Then there's a space laser that makes a beeping sound, but there's no beam that you could see. Very good for costs of the movie. Don't need to do any special effects on that, optical effects. Again, there's a group of idiots, emotional people, flirty and very unfit for any kind of a space mission. And without any kind of a knowledge of the surrounding land, they just don't stay together. They just break the group up and then they go paddling on the lake without knowing what's in the lake or what the lake is made of, if it would melt their little paddly-daddly boat. But it floats. But yeah, that's pretty much this B-movie. Well, I guess so we're gonna go visit Santa in Santa Claus Conquers the Martians from 1964. Absolute gem, guys. Absolute gem.
Do the Martians have chimneys that Santa goes down?
Well, we don't see the chimneys. This is actually like an abduction mission. They're trying to kidnap Santa Claus. Oh, yes.
Mon Dieu.
So, it's a heartfelt story of two kids who get kidnapped first by Martians who want some intel on the whereabouts of Santa Claus. Because, of course, there's an old and wise sage that has concluded on Mars that they could do a little bit more happiness in their lives, the Martian kids, and the master plan is then to kidnap Santa and take him to Mars to bring this happiness. And this is the first known appearance on film of Mrs. Claus. Anyway, it's kind of a laughable, of course, to start to talk about science in a film that is kind of a kids' comedy flick. But the Martians, if we're gonna talk about them, they are depicted as guys who like green spandex suits, and their faces are painted green. They look like humans and talk American English, and they have antenna hanging from their heads to communicate. And then the Martians land on the Earth's North Pole, and the kids try to escape the ship, but they run across a polar bear. Guys, I love this. I got to again hand it to the special effect. It was like almost as if you'd be there. The polar bear was terrifying. Let me just try and send you a picture, guys. I can't resist.
My body is ready.
Yeah, seems like it.
Yep.
Those things are quite regular in Finland.
Whoa. That's the stuff of nightmares.
I know.
I mean, nightmares for a production artist. Like, wow.
Right.
I'm not sleeping tonight because of that.
Yeah, at that point that I thought that this is some kind of a super cheap TV movie of the time, but it doesn't seem to be even that. It had a pretty decent budget and... But yeah, the Martians have a robot also that's used as an assassin or for destroying the front door of Santa's workshop. But it's really the Santa Claus who steals the show here with laugh, this really fake laugh at every situation and stupid magic tricks. There's one moment where one Martian hates Santa Claus so much and the kids that they are locked into the airlock, and he tries to throw them all into outer space. But there's a ventilation shaft, and the Santa and the kids, they use the Santa magic to squeeze through that hole and get back to the ship before the airlock gets opened. And then they come back laughing about it like it would have been nothing. Like, ha, you tried to kill us, but you're not much for Santa Claus's magic. Mars is kind of shown in the similar way as in the Angry Red Planet. The surface has dark dots and they are connected to each other as if they would be canals or something that people were thinking on the during the 18th century. And then there's this one Martian is really into cosplaying as Santa Claus or cross-dressing as Santa Claus, and then Santa, the real Santa, thinks that he could make a wonderful Martian Santa, ho, 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 and he becomes the local Santa, and the kids and the Santa are taken back to Earth. Happy times. And yeah, well, this is a film that's regularly listed on the top 100 worst movies of all time. I'm really shocked and amazed that Henrik didn't take this beautiful movie to his selection. Opportunity missed.
I have been somewhat aware of the film for quite some time. Like I would say for at least 10 years. And therefore, even though I haven't checked it out myself, I was more than willing to let this one go this time. And be like, yeah, I can let somebody else see these new vistas and open these new doors.
Yeah, the performances are quite hideous. The child actors are, I guess, pretty okay and mostly quite boring. But when you think about it afterwards, yeah, it had some pretty funky elements going on. But when you watch it, it's like, yeah, extremely skippable. But it did become some kind of a staple on TV in the US around 1991. For shits and giggles, I would say. Do you know anything about this, Zach? Is this kind of a Christmas staple still?
No. Not at all. What'd you call me?
Yeah, don't you guys have like yearly Christmas movie? So that, you know, which I would believe would make having a staple movie kinda hard, because the lineup would change yearly. And every Christmas you would have the newcomer that would be pushed heavily.
Yeah, and I think everyone's sort of got their own what is your favorite sort of classic Christmas movie to watch every year. I mean, I would say probably the most popular is, what's it called? A Christmas Story? Yeah, it's called A Christmas Story. It is from 1983. It's just a very sort of, growing, like, I think it takes place in the 40s. A nice good old white family having their little middle class Christmas, and it's a classic. And they literally, every Christmas, they play it on a loop for 24 hours. On some channel on TV, they will just play the movie over and over again for 24 hours. That's how much Americans love this film. I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of it, but it's very nostalgic. Again, it's very. It goes back to a simpler time when America was great. So it's very that. For me, if I'm going to watch a Christmas film, I might watch Chevy Chase in Christmas Vacation, or I might watch Die Hard 2, Iron Man 3. Those are better Christmas movies for me.
Yeah, with Henrik we just go for Come and See. That's a true Christmas classic.
That and Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence.
Or that.
Yeah, the film that actually does have Christmas in the title.
What were those two films?
Come and See.
I don't know that film.
And Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence.
I have a feeling these are
good for the festivities.
Good for the festivities based on just the images that popped up.
Mr. Lawrence has a David Bowie in it.
Yep.
So it's a certain fit.
Wow. Good times.
But then pretty much came the radio silence of the Martian films. There was the Viking landings from 1976, 2 Viking landers. NASA landed Viking 1 and Viking 2 on the surface of Mars, and this gave us the first clear images from the surface of Mars, first showing some rocks and sand, and then later the more of the vistas, the desolate, barren world with no vegetation or life that you could see. And this crushed the public interest on Mars. There's at least anecdotal evidence that it also crushed some of the spirit of the mission crew regarding Mars. People were disappointed, understandably. No green aliens there. Or grey for that matter. No plants, no water on the surface. But, yeah, sure, nobody knew really what to expect until they landed. And the landers did do biological experiments to detect if there's any Martian life in the soil, but the results were inconclusive. Some of the samples returned negative results, and there was at least one sample that gave possible positive results. But the data had to be then re-examined over the years, and the later missions have found evidence of occasional seasonal methane in the atmosphere. So this could indicate volcanic activity or microbial life as its waste product. But then the Phoenix lander found the perchlorate salts covering the Mars surface, which means that it can be dangerous for humans when ingested, and they could kill the surface bacteria when the perchlorates at least reach a certain temperature. So this is not too good news for life on Mars, but the jury is still out. Nobody knows. We don't know if there's life on Mars or not. But yeah, after Vikings there was a long silence of Mars-related films. Mission Mars came out in 1968, and the next film that I'm aware of being released is 1986 Star Crystal. But yeah, what about this little film called Mission to Mars?
Mission to Mars. It came out in 2000 with a pretty great cast. Tim Robbins and Gary Sinise, Don Cheadle, great cast. This film had all the makings for, this is going to be a good Mars film. And it sort of just didn't work out. It came out in 2000. It actually takes place in June of 2020 at the start of the film, but the majority of the film takes place in July of 2021. So what does the future look like, gentlemen, you might ask? What does 2000's version of 2020 and 2021 look like? Well, electric cars are the norm. Everyone has electric cars. And when you have a internal combustion engine gas-powered car, you're weird. You're different. If only that were true today. But it's not. Yeah, I mean, the film starts off as this film where you think, oh, this is about us settling on Mars and becoming this multi-planet civilization. They've got these missions to go up there, and they've sent some astronauts up there to sort of create a home base. But when they get there, shit goes wrong. So now they got to send a second team to go and save them. So while it has the setting of Mars, and it has Mars sort of at the focus of it, it really is more of this sort of rescue mission film. And the majority of, I would say, the film in the middle in Act 2 is just these people trying to get there, trying to save this person who's potentially stranded by themselves all alone on this planet. And then when they get there, then it just takes a hard left turn, and it becomes this alien movie about, let's see if we can communicate with some aliens who we think were here at one time. So the film's sort of all over the place. It does put forth this idea that we actually are Martians, that at one point, billions of years ago, Martians essentially seeded planet Earth. And so now we are cousins to these aliens, to these Martians, and one of the astronauts has the opportunity to go with this alien on to another galaxy. It's out there. It's really out there.
It's really out there. It has some gorgeous scenes, some good scenes that don't make any sense, but they're cool to look at. For example, when they have the problem at the spaceship, right? And then they have to go rescue this one guy who is starting to float and drop into the Mars atmosphere and burn. Then they have this funny rescue mission with all these wires trying to save the guy's life, but then he commits a suicide and takes his space helmet off.
So can I say, I actually cried during that scene.
Really? Oh.
Maybe I was having an emotional day. Maybe I was just it was a hard day for me. But that scene actually got to me because yeah, because it's a husband and wife team, which, by the way, NASA would never let space missions be run by couples. You are threatening the entire dynamic of the team by having a couple up there. But that's what but they thought that. I think they say something in there about how, oh no, this is supposed to improve, camaraderie and working together and more harmonious teams. Bitch, what you talking? It's gonna make nothing but people like yell at each other because they all know each other, and then gonna be in the middle of trying to figure out like, no, we gotta restart the boosters. Do we start now? What like the time with your mother's for Christmas when you forgot to fill up the car with gas? Like it just then they're gonna turn into some sort of domestic disturbance. Terrible idea. Terrible idea.
Love that movie, Domestic Disturbance. I mean, in the sense that it's like the model depiction of how not to make a movie.
Indeed. But the scene when the husband basically has to kill himself in order to save his wife. Because his wife is so dead set on, oh no, I know you're floating away, but I'm going to come and get you. I'm going to save you. And I'm going to risk my life to coming and getting you. And the husband knows, even if you got to me, you would not be able to save us both. We would not be able to get back to safety because I'm floating too far away. And his only option is to remove himself from the equation so that she doesn't have to consider him anymore. So he kills himself so that, well, now it's pointless for you to come all this way. You need to save yourself. It hit me a bit. I'll admit it.
Yeah, and apparently there are like structures, alien structures of some sort that are inside a Martian mountainous thing. And
oh yeah, okay, so here's some good shit. Okay, you guys are old enough to remember. Do you guys remember back in the mid to late 90s, in the infancy of the internet, and there were all those pictures of, have you seen the face on Mars? And there's this picture of what looks like a face on the planet it's three-dimensional. It's not like drawn into the ground, but it's like three-dimensional. I remember it, and it was for a long time, especially in those early days of the internet. It was just, oh, this is it. There's life on Mars. Someone like built this structure that looks like a face, and okay, no, it's an optical illusion. One, because of the way the mounds of dirt were with where the sun was at the time, creating shadows in just the right way. That's a part of it, and the other part of it is we humans, our brains are pattern-seeking machines. That's all our brains want to do, is seek out patterns in the world so that we can recognize, oh, I've seen that pattern before. That is a sort of cylindrical, slightly bent yellow thing. That's a banana, and that means food. That's all we do is look for patterns. And so that's all that's all this is it sort of looks like a face coincidentally in our brains, like, oh my god, it must be a face and there must be intelligence behind it. So that was debunked years ago. This film says, oh, no. It's real. That really is a face. And then when you take all the dirt off of it, yes, it is a giant structure of a white beaming, like it's made of marble, face that's the size of a stadium.
Seems to me that it's making more fun of the whole face thing than anything else.
Maybe, which again would sort of, that would go along with this film just takes a sharp left turn. And then, yeah, maybe it turned into something they were trying to make fun of. Who knows?
And this one guy goes with the Martian to their planet. For some reason, this alien was left on the planet just to wait to deliver a message when the humans arrive or something, and they float away.
Apparently, yeah, and he goes with them just because his wife died, and he's sort of like, well, I have nothing left on Earth anymore, and it's time for me to take the next step. So I'm gonna go with this alien to God knows where.
All right. Hopefully somebody is paying his credit card bills then on Earth. But this was a busy year for Martian movies. In 2000 we also got the Red Planet movie. Or Henrik, do you still want to fill in something on Mission to Mars?
Nope.
Good. Red Planet, what is this about?
Well, Red Planet followed Mission to Mars with only like 88 months. So it came very close to, Brian De Palma's depiction of Mars travel. And much in the same way as Mission to Mars, Red Planet also finds itself kind of in a pivotal point of when it comes to American or Hollywood Martian cinema. Like it's these are kind of the films that have to now has to tackle with the fact that as a planet in real life with real data with real science, Mars is a really boring place, and you kind of have to deal with the fact what can you really do with a red rock where nothing can grow. And at the same time, this is also the point where there still is all that studio mandated craze for the early 2000s CGI, which in Red Planet showcases as money being essentially wasted in bunch of pretty horrible CGI effects that truly hasn't stand the test of time.
Yeah, especially the monsters.
More than that, actually, just spending money on effects that would have been more easier and cheaper to do practically.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, there are CGI shots on camera lenses which have been modeled, 3D modeled, simply in case of you have to have CGI in early 2000s sci-fi film, and something like a camera lens that would actually be much more cheaper and more easier to do practically, where you can just take a goddamn camera and just have that do a little zoom move. You have those already lying around in your studio lot, so why not use that? And the answer is because of CGI.
Was that in the spaceship when in outer space or on the Mars surface?
It is in the outer space spaceship.
Okay.
When Katie and Moss is trying to locate the survey team.
Well, that explains it, Henrik. That it's really hard to shoot a film in zero gravity, basically.
Yeah, but it's not really hard to operate like automatically operate a camera lens in zero gravity. Those bastards do move in any gravity.
I'd like to know that there is no such thing though that as zero gravity. There's always gravity everywhere. But for simplicity's sakes.
Come on, scientific accuracy. Yeah. You're right. There's low gravity.
Right.
But really no zero gravity. You're always under the effect of gravity of something.
But in true Mars film fashion, Red Planet does follow the already established trend of Mars at this point being nothing but a frontier, like yet another, basically another place where you can have your Wild West scenario in one way or the other. And this is something that really kind of seems to appear a lot in American films, where there is this almost desperate need to find a frontier from somewhere. And much in the same way as it was with Aelita, in here Mars once again is something that you are to colonize. Whereas Aelita, the colonialization was done through social themes and social systems, and establishing another way of government where already one exists. Red Planet takes the road where the colonialization happens much more literally, to a point where the whole point of the movie is that humanity is trying to colonize Mars. And when I mentioned that Aelita is kind of in the breaking point where Mars as a planet is still allowed to be Mars, Red Planet is the movie where that is most definitely like thrown out of the window. In Red Planet, Mars is to be Earth 2, essentially. There is like in the film's lore, there is this whole like global initiative from all the countries to push money into this attempt to send rockets that would have algae in them in order to have Mars covered in the sea of algae, which aims to do the atmosphere breathable and also sustainable for human life. So in Red Planet, there is a intentional drive for humanity to actually move to Mars. And this is something that, well, these days is being echoed people like Elon Musk, who also wishes to someday reach this exact same point. And on top of that, Red Planet also showcases the kind of social colonialism where the whole where the idea is that what you are supposed to send to Mars is whatever is the current depiction of acceptable society. This is something that happens in Aelita too, even though to a lesser degree, but Red Planet is all in this department, to a point where actually the whole space mission behind Red Planet's narrative is actually completely unsustainable and is formed essentially by dysfunctional assholes, where a major limelight, for example, is given to Val Kilmer's Gallagher, who as a character is almost completely unlikable, and someone who really couldn't operate a space mission, let alone a colonialistic space mission. But it's all allowed because, once again, this was done in 2000, and keeping true the idea, the American idea of early 2000 society. It's supposed to be this late 90s kind of hereditary, ultra cool society where only the cool people get to do the cool shit. So of course Val Kilmer, even though not being in any way physically or mentally capable of pulling this type of mission, gets to go on to the super special Mars colonialization mission simply in the name of rule of the cool.
Isn't there even a jokes on the ship discussing that, hey, well, since we're gonna be there all alone, shouldn't we just declare independence and, just take the US out of the equation?
It's not even a joke. It's actually that it's hastily brought up and quickly dropped and never mentioned again, but the moment where that idea is presented, the character presenting it actually does so sincerely. He really is considering that we should just, drop the rest of humanity and just colonize the planet for ourselves, because we are the first ones there, and therefore we are the kind of right inheritors of Mars. And the second thing that immediately happens also to play into the whole cool kids around thematics is Val Kilmer's character Gallagher hitting Kate Moss's character, and Kate Moss falling all over for Val Kilmer, to a point where when the film finally ends and the mission is semi-failure, there is a promise that the humanity will somehow at some point be saved through the space box that they found on Mars. But the colonialization of Mars itself is a lost cause. And they are shipping back to home. Kate Moss is going like, well, at least I have plenty of time to get to know Val Kilmer. The character who is completely obnoxious and with whom you share no common ground at all. But once again, it's Kate Moss and it's Val Kilmer. So of course they are going to fall in love with each other. Karri and Moss, yeah.
Right. So, yeah. that kind of a film. A bunch of assholes are sent to Mars, and yeah, there's this one scene where one guy is pushed down the canyon.
Yeah.
Good team spirits and all. NASA at the top of their game. So there were a lot of movies about Mars during this time. There's Stranded from 2001. Are we gonna move there?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Now, this is one of those low-budget indie films again. This time from Spain, but the spoken language is English. We're kind of hoping to get more variety in the language department here, but no cigar. It's directed by Maria Lidon, credited in the film as Luna in the English version. The quality of the animation is poor, but I'm okay with that. It's still early 2000s, and they even used the leftover spaceship set pieces from Space Cowboys so that they could cut down the costs. We travel to the distant land, distant future. The year is 2020, and RS spacecraft crash lands on Mars. There's one astronaut that dies immediately upon impact, and there are 5 survivors that need to start conserving their supplies, oxygen, food, electricity, because the projected rescue mission for them would come in the next 26 months, after 26 months. The dead guy is buried here, must be the first burial in Mars, on Mars. The dead guy is buried under the Martian perchlorate. Well, even with the most limiting resource savings, they have air and other supplies for less than a year, so one astronaut has already accepted his fate. There are 3 others who go out desperately looking for something in the Martian environment. But yeah, the scenes of Mars, they were filmed in Lanzarote, which is part of the Canary Islands. And I will give you credit for this, credit where credit is due. This film has maybe the most convincing Mars landscapes that I've seen in these films. Well, that is to say until, 20 seconds later when they had the long shot of the Martian landscape, which reveals like steep canyons and clouds, and again steep elevation. They really have a problem of hiding the earth clouds here, and they have, like, the common thing with these goddamn films is that they have a lot of these steep canyons and places that look like Death Valley or Arizona desert. They don't even try to hide that fact. There are not such steep features on Mars. But is this maybe to say that the real Mars is too boring for the filmmakers? Could it be? Because the majestic landscape long shots, they seem to crave for those. And we have a lot of aggressively steep terrain in this mission to Mars and the last days on Mars and the Martian even.
I don't know. I think maybe part of it might be, well, I mean, obviously they're filming on Earth, and so it would cost more money to, digitally change landscapes. But I wonder if there's also this idea of, I mean, Mars and Earth are brother planets. Mars is like the older brother. So both planets are about the same age. They have roughly the same sort of interior makeup. So I don't know, maybe there is something to be said of, yeah, like this basically is just like Arizona or the Southwest of the United States or parts of the Middle East where it's this sort of reddish sand rock area. I don't know, maybe they're going for something there. Who knows? Or it could just be laziness, by all means.
Could be. Yeah, it goes a little bit more bonkers here. They find an underground tunnel. Well, there could be, who knows? I haven't been on Mars, but it has this kind of a Earth-like pressure in this underground tunnel and oxygen to breathe. So it's doing the same thing as in Red Planet, where they take their masks off because there's oxygen. And what happens?
That's such a standard trope, We're gonna take our helmets off, and oh my gosh, look, we can breathe. Like, even if the atmosphere was made of, first of all, it's mostly nitrogen and then oxygen, but even if it were made up of nitrogen and oxygen and all the things that we need, there's a little thing called microbial life or in other organisms that you could be breathing in. I mean, just because the air is clean doesn't mean it's safe to breathe.
Yeah, but you're forgetting that the rule of the cool makes it safe.
Yeah, like
That is true.
in the Red Planet, the excuse was that they were terraforming the planet already to such a degree that in what, like higher altitudes, you could breathe. And of course, there's no space radiation or any of those things.
Yeah, and in Ridley Scott's films, the common excuse is that nobody gives a shit.
But in this movie's case, Stranded 2001, the excuse is that there's like a alien-built chamber where apparently this oxygen and pressure technology is still working. They find like the bodies of hundreds of aliens that look like a cross again between a human and a gray alien. And then the labyrinth is crisscrossing and leads our protagonist lady to an area in Mars, outdoors, where you can breathe as well. Within this kind of a frame structure that the aliens have built. There's some kind of a magical wall that holds the oxygen and pressure, I guess, intact. Yeah. And there are animals, there's water to drink, and the movie then proceeds to go to the end credits where after showing, of course, the last camera footages that they had battery for. So it essentially turns into a found footage film for the last 2 minutes of the film. And the final voiceover goes, quote, "Our only objective now is to survive," end quote. Yeah, like exactly what you've been doing for the entire film. But that's the closing thoughts of the film, basically.
Wow.
Well, I can grant the director and the writers that this could also be some kind of a poetic symbolism for hallucinations when running out of oxygen. I prefer that theory than thinking that there's an oxygen including an pressurized chamber on Mars. That or they did Speed on Mars. There's a lot of unnatural language. Could be related to the fact that this is a Spanish production, but the English is a little bit crazy. I mean, even more unnatural language than you hear on the Flick Lab. For example, the lady astronaut who notions in the pressurized corridors that about this mummified alien corpse, quote, "2 arms, 2 legs, it all seems pretty human, but who knows what it looked like originally," end quote. Originally? Zach, would you use a word originally in this case?
If you're looking at a mummified corpse, I mean, you could. I wonder what it looked like originally. I think I would say I wonder what it looked like when it was alive.
Yeah, something like that. Or you could say, but who knows what it looked like in its prime?
Yeah, in its prime when it was alive. I wonder what it looked like back then. I wonder what it looked like in another state. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of originally is. I mean, you could say that, and it makes sense. And I understand. I mean, I understood what you said, but it's just not the most natural word, I guess I would say.
Right. All right. So what's next? War of the Worlds, 2005.
Arguably, I mean, I got it easy on this one because this is arguably the one of the more popular, if not the most popular film that involves Martians. So this is a standard remake of the 1953 version, and a standard adaptation of the original novel. Except this one's much better. This one's far better on multiple angles. Obviously, the special effects are better because we've gotten 50 years worth of technological improvements to make it better. But beyond that, this version actually has some character development. It makes you sort of care about who these people are a bit, instead of just sort of following this couple, this man and this woman who eventually will only serve you Danish and coffee because she's crying too hard. Now you've got a father trying to care for his 2 children. So it ups the stakes because it's no longer just 2 people who met, but now it's a father trying to do his fatherly duty. And his children are both, I mean, they're children. One of them is very young, and the other one's sort of a rebellious teenager. But Yeah, I think it's much better. Mars in this film is portrayed much more menacing. This is definitely a film where the Martians are the bad guy, and they are here just to take over. This is in no way could be interpreted as but they came and they wanted to see how it was, and because we attacked them, they fought back. No, they are here to attack. And in fact, one of the biggest changes to the film, as compared to the 1953 version, is they don't land on Earth. Their spaceships don't land on Earth, which in 1953, what they say is, oh, it looks like those are comets or meteors coming down, when really it's their spaceships. In this case, the spaceships have been here for thousands, tens of thousands potentially, of years underground, buried. And it's just the Martians themselves that come and get into the spaceships and then, then take over. So yeah, this one's far better, and they are here to take over and to turn this planet into another Mars, into one that they can live on, which is interesting because, like you mentioned in the beginning of this, Karri, the reason that Mars appears red is the oxidation of the iron that's in the soil. Mm. This film has this conceit that, oh no, it's actually red because the aliens, whenever they are going about doing their thing, they produce these red vines that sort of look like veins, that are filled with liquid, and that's how they sort of produce their vegetation and how they sort of survive. And they look like red vines, and that is really what is covering the planet Mars. So that's a bit, fantastical, because we know that vines are not covering the planet. We know that it's because of oxidation.
I stand corrected.
So that's an interesting idea, and I think it's definitely more menacing because the first shot that you get of it's Tom Cruise sort of looking out the window, and he sees the field that's next to him covered in these red vines, and you sort of realize, oh, this is what makes the planet red. They're trying to do the same thing to us. That's cool. That's interesting. And of course, I'm a big fan of any movie that they say takes place in Boston. Which at the end of this film, they say takes place in Boston. It was definitely not shot in Boston. But, it's always nice to get a little Boston representation. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, kind of like we say, at least in Finland. So rough games in Boston. All right.
I love that you have that phrase. That's awesome.
So bizarre.
Well, there are rough games afoot.
To be honest, most likely only Karri is most likely the only person using it.
And people who follow ice hockey, I've found, somehow.
We do have a good hockey team.
Oh, you do? Yes. Hopefully it's still doing as well as it was 20 years ago. I haven't been following NHL too much lately.
I don't follow it at all. People tell me that we have a good hockey team, and I go, oh, we do? Oh, that's cool.
That settles it. Anything else about the War of the Worlds?
This is really the Spielberg Cruise heyday. This era, because Minority Report also came out around this time. This was when Spielberg was really pushing the science fiction part of his filmography, and I gotta say, I live for it. And little Dakota Fanning, who had been in some other things before this, but I think this was her big entree onto the national stage.
Oh yeah.
She is a talented little girl. She's incredible in this film for being 10, 11 years old, however old she is. She is asked to do a ton of stuff. Not only physicality, like, having to, you're running and you're jumping, you're swimming, you're jumping off boats, and you're doing all this crazy physical stuff. But emotionally, she is asked to do a ton of lifting in this film, and she lifts it masterfully. Very, very, very well done.
Yeah, one of those child acting geniuses, I would say, kind of like the kid in The Ring. I forgot his name, unfortunately.
Yeah, just you're right. There's every now and then there comes a child actor who just there's something different about them. They're in tuned with their bodies and their emotions and their brain. Like they're just operating on a different level. And Dakota Fanning is one of them.
The Last Days on Mars, next on the menu from 2013, and once again, I'm with the low budget Mars film. There's a lot of those, to be fair. There's the Irish Ruairi Robinson, who loses his feature film director virginity with this one. Everything starts out promising visually. The film is a pleasure to look at. The coloring and the landscape shots are pretty. I'm not sure how accurate the coloring is ever when it comes to Mars, as when you get the real images from Mars, they require this special processing tweaking that the colors can be seen there and may not be exactly what you would yourself see on Mars surface with your own eyes. So the landscape looks like a lot like Arizona again to me, without having visited Arizona. I would think that's the case. The film was filmed in Jordan though, and the local vegetation was removed digitally. So here we have a landfall on Mars for unknown reasons, and it sucks one of the astronauts into the void. And when they start to investigate that little hole, there's algae type of substance on the rocky features revealed under the surface. So presumably this is what this guy gets infected with at the bottom of this hole, and he re-emerges. Yeah, I came to expect that this would be like a virus that would infect the crew. It is, but sadly, this is very shortly becoming. It very soon transforms into Mars of the Living Dead. So anyone who comes in contact with the virus, this makes the astronauts one by one into zombified killer maniacs. This might be the most idiotic crew just yet depicted on screen. They deliberately pick fights with each other, like extremely deliberately, and make irreparable damage to themselves with insults that lack all empathy towards their dead comrade, for example. Well, it could be said about the director that his aim was to create an alien-like film based on Mars, and so all these themes about the crew having to fight some kind of an unknown pathogen or virus and terrifying force which compromises them, and they're in a compromising and claustrophobic environment. That part is okay with me, but then the idea of zombies and on Mars, it's quite cliche. It's not too imaginative, right? You just combine zombies and Mars. That's what it is, and it's quite easy to lose interest with the rest of the film. It goes into this let's escape from the zombies film. So it's kind of unable to bring anything too new in its elements to the zombie survival genre. So the acting is one of the strongest suits of the film. And we have Liev Schreiber here. I used to intentionally skip movies that have Liev Schreiber in them because I couldn't stand the dude, but I have to give it to the guy. Yeah, I have to give it to the guy. He has come a long way since the Scream days. I kind of enjoyed his performance.
Scream. That's good stuff. I love those movies. Liev Schreiber is definitely he takes some getting used to.
Yeah, there's something about the dude, but this was fun, and the props for the visual aesthetics, that's all nice. But we've seen this before, which is not usually. I try to avoid this as an argument for films, but we've definitely seen this before. And the promising structure of the beginning moves into this let's run from the zombies. And that's about it. There's a Rotten Tomatoes consensus for the movie which goes, quote, neither intelligent enough to work as a thought-provoking sci-fi nor trashy enough to provide the B-movie thrills. The Last Days on Mars proves as cinematically barren as the titular planet. End quote. Rough. Oof. I agree with the message to a degree, but I don't know if it's fair to say that Mars is cinematically barren.
I think we're proving that it's not barren today.
Yeah. That's all my thoughts on this film. Moving on to The Martian from 2015.
Yeah, so The Martian perhaps is the best example and best case of for the argument that Mars is cinematically barren. The Martian is extremely heavy, extremely realistic sci-fi, which means that you, Kari, you absolutely would love this film. And for all the rest of us, that means that it's the film that has the epic moment when Matt Damon farms some potatoes and drives around in a rover and finds a location on ground and dig some shit up.
Yeah, let's stop here because this is a really important point. Like when I first saw the film, before I had kind of more information on the planet Mars and how it works, this felt like a pretty boring movie, to be honest. But yeah, it's quite useful to have the kind of a backdrop or the understanding of about on some kind of a layman level of the planet Mars to enjoy this movie to the fullest. And even then, this growing potatoes on Mars will have problems and, well, at least health consequences to anyone who eat those potatoes because of the perchlorates. But I digress.
Yeah, I'm not entirely certain exactly how much even having the basic understanding of understanding of the planet actually helps with the Martian. To be clear, I'm not in the camp that felt that the Martian was boring. I did quite enjoy the film, but the underlying fact is that while it's easy to criticize basically all the other depictions of Mars or Martian cinema on the grounds that it's too fantastical and it's obvious that no real science is behind those depictions of the red planet, the Martian makes it perfectly clear exactly why perhaps you have to lean into more fantastical as the Martian puts it out. If you stay true to the hard science, there kinda is just one story that you can tell.
Survival?
And that's how you form some goddamn potatoes. Because there really is nothing else on goddamn Mars that you can do to fill up your 2 hour film. You have to be stranded and it has to be a fight for survival in an environment where, okay, the atmosphere and the temperature certainly are something that easily can kill you, but if you can avoid those, then your biggest obstacle would be, as Matt Damon puts it out, the food and the water. And once you got those covered, basically your biggest obstacles on the surface of Mars have just been dealt with. You have the means to stay alive, meaning that you can now sustain yourself on Mars. And then you get to the second obstacle, which is that Matt Damon has to get back home because that's the tagline of the movie poster. And when it comes to the film, it's easy to see what Ridley Scott kind of was aiming at with The Martian. The Martian, unfortunately, is the case where Ridley Scott made the film after the suicide of his director brother, not as well known Tony Scott. So with that, the kind of meditation on loneliness and the meditation on feeling of being left behind or feelings of abandonment are quite clear on The Martian.
Yeah, was it the Martian, the kind of a project that he took on to kind of have something else to think about than his dead brother?
I'm not entirely certain. I don't know for certain if the driving motive behind doing the Martian was to have something else. Take your time so that you wouldn't have to think about your brother. But that's an argument that I can very easily believe. Knowing what happened like in Scott's private life outside of the film and seeing the film itself. Kind of more saddening though is the fact that The Martian unfortunately also is the film in Ridley Scott's filmography that lands weirdly enough in middle of Ridley trying to figure out should the fucking helmet stay on when you are on a foreign planet or should it not? Like this is The Martian is exactly between Prometheus and Alien Covenant, the other two Ridley Scott sci-fi epics that both feature the characters that make the exact same logical the logic mistake that was done in Stranded and in Red Planet, where they quickly just deduce that the atmosphere is breathable and remove helmet. At least in The Martian, the helmet stays on.
Right.
Outside of Matt Damon growing potatoes, you kind of have the Apollo 13-esque second plot, which is the NASA trying to figure out how exactly bring the one person home, or how to salvage the mission. And on those terms, The Martian kinda stays very close to Apollo 13, with the added caveat that in The Martian, NASA at least provides, while not outright a villain or antagonist, at least some kind of an opposing force to the salvage saving attempt or ideas.
Yes, a really nice point that you brought up, that it's really hard to make. In the end of the day, it's pretty hard to make a workable movie about Mars because there's nothing there. Not really. I mean, the most that you can do is kind of the soap opera on Mars, which then leads to stupid scenes like dropping somebody down a canyon. But it best follows the science here about Mars out of all of these movies.
It does. But that is both a blessing and a curse, kind of depending on exactly how much you demand or how much you value the hard science in your sci-fi film.
Well, the guy who wrote the book was clearly some kind of a sci-fi nerd who enjoyed to write pretty detailed depictions of how the events would go on Mars or foreign planets.
Yeah, he most definitely is. And when it comes to Scott's film, I would actually, and Scott staying true to actual science and a realistic scenario, I would actually credit that more to the original novel than to Sir Ridley himself.
My question is, but is the film funny? And I asked that in jest, but also because it caused some controversy at the Golden Globes that year, because it was nominated for Best Picture, Musical, or Comedy, and a lot of people had a lot of things to say about that.
Well, it's a funny movie, right, Henrik? It has kind of the same humor that you have in the novel. The novel I really couldn't get into because it has even more of this type of humor. Like how to describe it? I don't remember any direct quotes or anything, but like he's going through the music tapes from the colleagues that left the planet, and he's just going through over and over and over again those tapes, and it's reaping a lot of humor from that kind of events and being alone on Mars, and it's kind of like that doesn't work for me. I had to stop reading the book, to be honest.
I don't know about funny, like as a defining attribute.
No.
The Martian does have fun moments, and it does have a certain lightness in the way how its main character tackles the obstacle that he faces. Like there is most definitely there are jokes in The Martian, there are funny moments in The Martian, and there is something I would almost say refreshing in the way how Matt Damon kind of faces the situation. That he has this a certain type of tonal lightness into what is going on, while he also understands the gravitas of the situation. So it is like I am in I am in this do or die situation, but I'm not just going to mope about it. And that is seeing how this is over 2 hour film, that is hugely appreciated. But at the same time, to say that this is a comedy or that this is a funny film, I would say it's more like a comedy written by a former computer programmer, directed by a guy who just lost his brother.
Yeah, why do you actually bring it up? Do you think the kind of film was suffering due to that?
No, I don't think it's suffering due to that, but I do think that you actually very clearly can see it in the film.
Hmm. But to come back into the point that it's quite hard to make like good movies about Mars, I felt that this was the kind of the master show of making a film about Mars in the way that you can make it interesting and exciting being on Mars. While you grow potatoes, I think that's kind of a more funny thing than anything else. Carrying on the potato joke, this many potatoes left, and I'm gonna have potato now with what ketchup or whatever, and kind of the daily challenges of the situation. It was able to carry the film through with just Matt Damon on Mars and occasional shots back at Earth and what's happening there.
Yeah, but like you mentioned, the magic word is able to carry through the film, and that kinda is perhaps the biggest praise and also the biggest condemnation that you can give the Martian, or not the Martian itself, but the possibility of you doing another really hard sci-fi take on Mars as a planet. To me, The Martian stands as a showcase that this is a film that you can do pretty much just once. Or, maybe you can have a second go after 10 or 20 years. But you can't really tell this story that many times if you are still gonna, stay true to your story being hard sci-fi. There's only so many ways that you can make growing potatoes interesting.
Depends, though. We've seen some interesting plot elements that could be recycled in a proper good movie, like the colonization of Mars, terraforming of Mars, finding something weird on Mars.
I would say not really, no.
Or maybe the challenges of the perchlorates or something, getting pretty sciencey, but that as a like the survival or the well-being of the colony on Mars. What would be the daily challenges and
I would say the daily challenges would be that it's impossible. Like the whole point of colonializing Mars, like really colonializing it, once again, in my opinion, leads heavily into the fantastical. It leans into the whole red planet scenario. We somehow managed to, make this farmable and sustainable for a large number of people. And once you break that barrier, well, yeah, then you can try to have your human drama with some type of a space colony on Mars. But as Matt Damon kind of proves it, you can't really have a colony on Mars. You can perhaps have Matt Damon on Mars.
well, the colonization or the colony on Mars is for sure gonna happen, I don't know if we still have the proper technology. Obviously not, because we are not there, so we can't know, and we need to test it also on site. The question that I think is more important here is are we gonna stay on Mars? And I think the answer is no, at least not in any near future, until we get to some kind of a gene therapy where we start to create humans who are more able to live in the conditions of Mars.
I really don't see colonialization of Mars as any kind of a certain deal. I do know that certain figureheads really want to push the idea these days, but like as the Martian showcases, the Mars really is a shithole planet.
It's really
It's an absolute hellhole. You shouldn't go there.
Yeah.
And even when it comes to, you wanna colonialize a piece of rock that really does not want you around, well, just colonialize the moon. It's closer.
Yeah, but though it's not really, it's way less fit for humans. I mean, both are complete hellholes, but at least Mars has some atmosphere, and you could potentially maybe down the line terraform it with better technology than we have. But I think
not gonna happen.
It's gonna happen.
Humanity will extinguish itself before we even could have any kind of idea how to colonialize anything like Mars.
Well, probably that's I'm, just the existence of nuclear bombs is a bit of a problem for our species. But we have to be a multi-planetary species. Because
no, we don't.
Yeah, we have.
No, we don't.
Yeah, if we
could just try to fix the one planet that we have, except that's impossible for us.
Yeah, but Henrik, we are gonna take this on a larger timeline. Of course, this is to assume that the human race is gonna be the human race or in existence in any form in the next couple of billion years. When the sun will expand and come into the red giant phase, when the whole Earth is gonna be vaporized and destroyed, probably. At least it's gonna be just a hellhole. So at that point, our only chance of survival is either Mars, or then maybe we have such of a crazy technology at that point that we can exit the solar system. But Mars, yeah, we have to go there.
No, we don't. Mars is a bust. It absolutely is. If you wanna like really believe in magic solutions and in somehow, we have to escape the Earth in order to survive as a species.
Right.
I would say, put your money on the space travel, and you, I don't know, put your money on goddamn Star Trek or Babylon 5 that you just launch 10 space stations somewhere far away from Earth, and you live there
in zero gravity or near zero gravity.
But well, whatever, I would say both cases are actually more easily to achieve than you terraforming Mars.
Yeah, well, I would say it's safer on Mars than being floating in outer space with where you have zero protection from the radiation. Whereas on Mars you could also build tunnels, caverns.
It's the case where you manage to terraform the Mars, and you manage to actually have a field where you can farm your crops for your colony. And then the first cold night comes in and all your crops die, and you're gonna fucking starve to death.
Well, we gotta solve those problems. We gotta do this.
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's change the whole planet. I don't know. Let's shoot algae at Mars. That's gonna fix it. No more cold nights in Mars.
Yeah.
Or if you have a really good heating system, honestly, even zero gravity space station is more suitable and more kinda achievable than you terraforming the planet Mars.
Yeah, there are actually real people, real organizations who are working day and night to solve these problems. that we could do it in the future. You crack jokes at it now, but as history has shown us, you don't necessarily shouldn't do that, because then it's gonna bite you in the ass.
There are real people, there are real organizations that believe that we are descendants of an alien race whose forefathers were trapped inside of a volcano by another alien race. I perhaps, as history has showed, shouldn't crack jokes about these people.
Apples and oranges, Henrik. And let's change from apples and oranges to eggs. Would you hold all of your eggs in the same basket? No, I think this is like the very simple and effective and important analogy. We can't have our species on one planet. We have to be multiplanetary to save our asses. If you ever want to save our asses.
So start the space program and build those goddamn space stations.
And lose your bone density and whatever. Well, unless we create artificial gravity, but that's
you
more...
only lose your bone density in that situation. In Mars, you starve to death. In space station, you at least, as a last resort, you can try cannibalism and inbreeding. In Mars...
What's the difference, though?
You forgot yourself outside for the night, and you died.
Just asking, what's the difference, really, to have indoor environment on Mars or on a space station, except that you have some gravity on Mars?
You can breathe without spacesuit and some type of external source of oxygen.
Yeah, just like on Mars.
Well, you can't really.
And it's been also tested that you can produce oxygen on Mars, so this is good news.
The whole magic argument, once again, is produce.
Mm?
Mars itself does not have oxygen.
Yeah.
Not readily available, at least. You have to produce it.
Exactly. It's a chemical process that the Perseverance was able to do this.
Which, once again, leads into the problem that you need to have machinery to produce oxygen in an environment where basically everything in that environment tries to destroy your machinery. Let's
agree that space is hazardous and always trying to kill you.
Well, yeah. So don't go there. God damn it. all space films have proven to you that you shouldn't go into space.
It's the human spirit. We must explore. That's how we are built.
It's also human spirit that you must, stick your dick into a pencil sharpener.
And
there's Darwin Awards were created
and rape
because of human spirit.
Rape and loot and destroy.
Yeah, precisely. So no, I wouldn't trust any kind of a achievement of terraforming Mars. Especially Mars of all goddamn planets to humanity.
This guy Robert Zubrin that we pathetically we tried to get the guy to the show. That this is a guy who has kind of committed his life to the human missions on Mars.
And most likely will die without ever seeing anything come from it.
Well, okay, we have one more movie to go. Is Zach wanting to throw something?
I'm gonna side with Henrik.
Really?
Don't think I don't think that we should be spending our time, money, and energy figuring out how we can make another planet, one on which life as far as we know it has never evolved. All life that we can name and can't name has evolved on this planet's atmosphere. True. And composition. Earth life is made for Earth, and I think to try and move that to another planet with a completely different environment, I don't know how well that would go. And if it were possible to do that, the amount of work it would take to do that, I think we can take all that time and energy that we're spending on trying to terraform Mars and spend it to terraform Earth. I don't know if it's still called terraforming if you're doing it to Earth, But we have fucked this planet over so poorly that we're eventually going to destroy it. And then we're going to say, oh, you know what? Let's go to Mars and let's live there. And it's going to be so much better. And then we're going to fuck Mars as well. No lube. It's just going to be a real dry fuck. It's going to be really terrible. Because that's the way humans are. I don't even, this is cynical, I'm putting it out there, very cynical. I don't think we as a species deserve to be a multiplanetary species because we are like a horde of vultures or locusts that come in, rape, pillage, and destroy everything we touch. If we as a species can get better as a species and can maybe get closer to that Star Trek sort of place where we move beyond material goods, we have enough resources for everyone and everyone gets what they need, and we really then want to seek out other places for the purity of exploration, that's great. I'm all for that. But but we need a backup plan because we fucked this planet so bad. We need somewhere else to go. No, we don't deserve that. And we deserve to just die as a species, if that's what it means.
Just to be
very cynical. Sorry.
Just to be,
I must say that even Carl Sagan couldn't have said it better.
Just to be clear, when you're
wow.
Before we close this massive tangent, when we are talking about colonization, I'm talking about like people who go there and then come back to planet Earth in some distant future. I think. Are you saying that is not going to happen? That we're not going to have a base even there for a few people?
Oh, my issue is not of whether or not it will happen, but whether it should happen. I don't think it should. I think, we probably could set up a base there, but it would be very limited, small group of people. It would definitely not be any sort of species migration by any stretch of the imagination.
Not at this time, at least, no.
Yeah, it would be, at best case scenario, even in future, it would be Matt Damon and 5 of his friends.
Probably Ben Affleck.
Funded by NASA.
All right.
To wrap that up, I was just going to say, have you guys seen that Time Magazine did this piece about how much it would cost to rescue Matt Damon's characters? So Matt Damon has been rescued from Mars and in Interstellar and Saving Private Ryan and Syriana and Green Zone and Elysium and Courage Under Fire. And they asked experts what would it actually cost to save Matt Damon in all of these films, and they totaled it all up. It would equal almost $1 trillion to save Matt Damon. So
he's just a guy who just can't take care of himself.
He's got to stay home. Like, we need to get him like a home health nurse. Let's put him in a really nice country with socialized medicine where a home health nurse will come to his home every day and take care of him and buy his groceries. And let's just, he needs to take it easy. Take a rest, Matt Damon. Take a rest.
Yeah.
But Zach. As the film proves, the act of bringing Matt Damon home is something that brings the entire humanity together.
I think I'm going to cry now.
All right, I guess we still have one movie to go.
Oh, and that's me.
Yeah.
Our final movie, The Space Between Us, 2017. I would say that this is probably similar to The Martian, in which it is closer to more scientifically accurate in terms of what would it be like to live on a colony in Mars for an extended period of time. In this case, the main character, played by Asa Butterfield, his mother is unknowingly pregnant with him when she gets on the rocket to head to Mars. She finds out she's pregnant en route to Mars, because it takes several months. And when she gets there, she gives birth to him there on Mars. So this is a child who was born on a planet with different gravity, and because of that, he does have this sort of, well, I mean, he's played by Asa Butterfield, which anyone who knows, he's very tall and lanky. So when at some point he decides, because he's 16 and he's an angsty teenager, and his mother died sadly giving birth to him, and And now he wants to go home and be with his father, who he has no idea who that is, but he wants to go on this journey to find himself and his father. And along the way, he meets a girl and who helps him out, and it's a nice little coming of age, young romance sort of film
With a Martian.
with a Martian. That being said, I don't think that Mars really holds any sort of special place in the film. I mean, really, I think Mars is sort of just it's sort of a placeholder for, I think, any sort of fish out of water story. I mean, in this case, it really only acts as a motivator for, he's on a time crunch. His body is not used to Earth, and his body starts experiencing certain side effects to this prolonged exposure to Earth's environment. And that sort of creates just pressure of you got to get to the end of the journey quickly so that you'll make it. But other than that, I mean, I don't think it really serves much of a purpose. It really could just be any sort of kid from another country coming to America, or a kid from another culture who speaks a different language. I think it could really sort of be anything like that, but they just chose Mars for this. But props for the scientific accuracy. It's not, like I said, there's nothing really Martian-y about it. Even his ectomorphic sort of stature, this very tall, lanky sort of thing, he's not taller or lankier than a human, because he's played by a human. He's played by Ozzy Butterfield, who is not wearing any prosthetics. There's no digital trickery to make him appear taller or lankier than he is.
Is that true?
Oh no? Oh, is he made to look taller and lankier?
I don't know, but he really looks tall and lanky.
He is tall and lanky.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's 6 feet in real life and very skinny.
Wow.
Well, he's actually 24 in real life. He's not 16. But so yeah, I think it's decent. There's some great character moments, but there's some also really bad moments of terrible acting. But it's okay. It's okay. It's not great, but it's not terrible. It's okay.
It happens more on Earth than on Mars, but it was kind of interesting to follow somebody who the first child to be born on Mars, who travels back to the Earth, and then kind of observing the side effects, which are kind of not as big plot point as the love story in the center of it all. But yeah.
Yeah, and the science is great. I mean, he has to have surgery before he comes to Earth to basically strengthen his bones, because his bone density is not great. Well, it's fine for Mars, but it would not be good on Earth. So he has to have like carbon fiber, like netting, basically installed over his bones to strengthen them. And yeah, then he has cardiovascular problems when he gets to Earth, because again, he's not used to it. So props for the science. While they're up there on Mars, they have to exercise all the time because they're in this lower gravity environment. There's you have to work your muscles more so they don't atrophy, and they talk about that a lot. It's good. It's good science. It's good science, but that's the best part of it.
Well, of course, we don't know how it would look like if somebody would get pregnant or would be in the middle of pregnancy on a spaceship in low gravity, and then coming with the baby, well, actually directly to the operating table to have birth on Mars. They're gonna rush her from the spaceship to the operating table to do the surgery or whatnot.
Also another point, if that same as on Mission on Mars, where NASA would never allow couples to be on these missions together, you do not get on a rocket ship without having taken a pregnancy test.
Right.
And without being tested for, make sure you're not sick, you're not going to get sick, all these things. And then even if, she could say, oh, well, maybe she took the pregnancy test the week before and then she conceived like the night before. No, they isolate you. They isolate you away from people for at least a couple weeks, because they want to make sure that you haven't gotten anything and there's no incubation period for whatever illness you have. So I a little bit call bullshit on the whole, like, oh my God, she didn't know she was pregnant, the whole thing. But, I understand. They need it for the plot. They need that to happen so that he can be born there.
Yeah, that is the question with your organs and everything flying around in the emptiness and then giving birth on Mars. Probably not gonna be a healthy pregnancy. Well, the mother dies, but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, she died too, so
she died, but he didn't.
yeah.
Yeah, interesting one. Anything else about that?
How's that?
Sweet. Special mention for an actor goes to.
On my end, that goes to Matt Damon.
I'll go with. I would go with the Matt Damon, but since I'm going with my movies, I guess. Guess I would have to go with Liev Schreiber.
I'm going to go with Dakota Fanning in War of the Worlds.
Sweet. Is there any small role in the film that you would somehow want to highlight?
I'll say in Mission to Mars, I'll say the scene that made me cry. So I'll give it out to Tim Robbins for pulling a tear out of me.
I'll give it to the unnamed professor actor doing the goofy victory dance when he creates the anti-gravity powder in A Trip to Mars from 1908.
Nice.
What resonated with you the most, or the least?
For me, it was this question of language. I'd love to ask the two Finns here. So in English, we use the word alien a lot, but we also use the word Martian. Martian meaning one from Mars, but we don't use it only in meaning people from Mars or creatures from Mars. It's just the general term, which I find fascinating from an etymological standpoint, that we just equate Mars with all sort of alien life. Yeah, do you guys do the same in Finnish?
I think we do. Wasn't the question that do we use the word Martian for talking about other people or other species than possible Martians themselves?
Like if they came from Jupiter.
I have never actually experienced that one.
Like casually saying like, oh, it's some kind of Martian there.
No.
Yeah.
Never
Okay.
come across that.
So maybe that's just an English thing, or at least it's one of the languages that do it.
Well,
so yeah, I find that interesting that we call them Martians, even though they could be from Jupiter or Neptune or wherever.
certainly, I think it's been used like to indicate that it's somebody is an alien or would be alien. Maybe we used it a little bit jokingly. What resonated with me the most? Let's go with the. Well, I could go with some fancy philosophical stuff here, but let's go with Bat Rat Spider Crab. Henrik?
To me, it's the odd realization that the Mars kind of started out as just a place that has its own identity and something that kind of is given the right to drive the humans out, as in case in Trip to Mars, but it pretty quickly turned out to be just kind of another frontier which just exists there for us to take advantage or terraform or some other way kind of turn it into a society or a planet that is somehow more easily understandable to us Earthlings.
Yeah, there's definitely some ethical questions to, at this point, to think about colonizing or having people or even rovers on Mars, because it's so easy to pollute the place with Earth life, and we still don't know a heck of a lot about Mars, and need to do that before doing any of the human thing of polluting it. In one adjective, how would you describe these films?
Colonializing. That would be mine objective.
I'll tag on to that and say imperialism.
I'll be naughty and I just go with bad. Favorite quotes? Anyone?
I'm gonna say it's from the narrator in Spielberg's War of the Worlds, which is narrated by Morgan Freeman. It's a bit long, but it's the opening narration that he gives to the film. It's really fascinating, and it's basically copied and pasted from H.G. Wells's opening paragraph of the novel. Perhaps later, maybe that'll be an extra feature where we'll put some like interesting music behind it, and I'll read it in a very mysterious voice.
We can leave it after the outro. Well, mine is pretty short. In the Angry Red Planet, when the rocket ship lands back to Earth, there are these 2 survivors and 2 dead people. They still don't know, that the mission control doesn't know if there's any survivors, anybody to be helped or not. So they are kind of wary about the radiation. They don't want to go near this ship because of fears about radiation. But then when they notice that there are actually survivors, then the mission control guy goes, "To hell with radiation!" And they rush to the rescue. Yeah. Fuck cancer. In an interesting context. Would you consider to watch these films again? No.
No. Maybe Spielberg's War of the Worlds. It's fun.
Perhaps The Martian and Aelita, like, would be possible at some date. Rewatchable films. Red Planet. Well, I've now seen it once, and I would say that one time is enough.
Do you think any of these Martian films have any staying power or legacy into the future? I would go that Martian, for sure, is gonna stand the test of time. Maybe one or the other of the War of the Worlds, and yeah, not much.
I'd agree with that.
I don't know. Spielberg's War of the Worlds and The Martian kind of would appear to be the easiest picks, and the ones you would most think would have a lasting power. Do they really, though? I'm not entirely certain. Yeah. Currently, everybody is still on their 5-year row of gushing over The Martian, but still, I somehow I just like it's not a bad film. It's in all thoughts and purposes, it's well-made movie, but I still don't. I'm not certain that it will have like a true legacy.
Time will tell. Let's check back in 2040. Would you recommend these films? Because it's kind of a different thing from what you consider to watch these films again. Could be different.
I'd recommend half of the ones that I talked about. I would recommend the original War of the Worlds, the remake, and I think that's it. I don't think I'd recommend Mission to Mars or Space Between Us.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't recommend my films. I wished that I could have recommended The Last Days on Mars. Looked kind of cool in the beginning, then winded up into the famous house. And Stranded.
Wait, you're not going to recommend Santa Claus Conquers the Martians?
No.
Oh.
Unfortunately not.
So sad.
I had some hopes for Stranded, but no. It just didn't seem to have any kind of conclusion or anything to say.
From my lineup, Red Planet. No, that film is a complete wash. Aelita is kind of tricky. It's not bad movie per se, but it is a movie that is kind of 3 different movies in the same package. Aelita starts as heavy domestic drama, and from there turns almost slapstick comedy, and finally is like this Flash Gordon-y space adventure time, all resorting into, well, none of it really happened, it was all just a dream, which in the end does make it kind of hard to recommend, because it's kind of like it's so all over the place that it's kind of hard to say under what banner you would recommend it. Like, you can't recommend it as a drama because the tone shifts. You can't recommend it as a comedy because most of it is still drama, and the space adventure is just like the last minutes of the story, truly. And then it all is just, was in the head all this time, kind of a cop out. So that makes it really hard to recommend. And it's not even, in my opinion, it's not even best of the what the Soviet cinema has to offer. And The Martian, which once again, I guess everybody thinks would be kind of like an auto recommendation, seeing exactly how beloved it was when it came out, and that the fact that people still talk about it kind of adoringly. And well, The Martian, I must stress, it's not a bad film in any way. It's really well made film. Ridley Scott knows how to make films, and this is, once again, this is perhaps the better end of Ridley Scott's kind of these later outings that we have now been getting out. It most definitely is not as bad as Exodus, Gods and Kings, or as incomprehensible as was Prometheus, and not nearly as disappointing as was Alien Covenant. So most definitely, it's better Ridley Scott films. Perhaps The Martian could get like half-hearted recommendation. If you wanna really see a hard sci-fi realistic take on Mars, then by all means check out The Martian. But if you do that, please do remember that a major plot point is that Matt Damon manages to farm potatoes. And another major plot point is that Matt Damon manages to get the rover going and rides around in the rover and digs some NASA stuff out of the ground. So, with that caveat, I would recommend The Martian.
Yeah, for the science guys.
For the science guys, and also those who have seen Apollo 13 and kind of feel that they would want to see another film a bit like that.
Yeah, it's boring as fuck for some people.
I would say to most people.
Yeah.
Or it would be that if Matt Damon wouldn't give such a great performance,
I mean,
and if Ridley Scott wouldn't be such a high note as a director.
Yeah, just boring as fuck comment was towards Apollo 13.
Well, I would say Apollo 13 is as interesting as is the kind of a rescue operation aspect of The Martian. Wow. Perhaps even more interesting, because in Apollo 13 they managed to crack more jokes when they are planning the rescue operation. In The Martian, the rescue kind of boils down into, well, I really haven't slept in 2 weeks and I really like coffee, but I did do math.
What's the order of preference for these films, guys? On my part, I can go first. I'll go with the best one as The Last Days on Mars, the zombie stuff, 2013. Then Stranded, 2001, which went a little bit out there with this tunnels on Mars where they find alien bodies. Well, hallucinogens, powerful stuff. The Angry Red Planet from 1959, B-movie from the old days. A Trip to Mars, 1910, this short film, let's put it here, was entertaining 4 minutes. A Trip to Mars, 1918, because I really couldn't get behind the kind of boring depiction of Martians. No creativity in my books whatsoever. And Santa Claus Conquers the Martians as the final worst of the worst from 1964 for me.
To me, it would be The Martian, Aelita, and lastly Red Planet, which stands as a testament of why capitalist filmmaking does not work.
I would have to say, first would be Spielberg's War of the Worlds, then Space Between Us, then Mission to Mars, and then No, then the original War of the Worlds, and then Mission to Mars.
Complete the sentence, please. You really know you're watching Mars-related films. When?
When you see films being shot in the southwest of the United States and like Arizona, and it's the red rocky landscape.
When you learn that the Martians were nothing but tree-hugging hippies who speak Danish.
When you unironically think that your female co-worker's shit is more valuable than gold. You fucking incel.
Yeah, for anything related to Mars, I'd like to drop some quick shout-outs. So if you're into Mars, maybe check out Astronomy Cast for like a quick fast food on Mars. And then, well, not really fast food. It's not fair to say because these are Astronomy Cast and Event Horizon from John Michael Gaudier are both pods that are very informative, and the speakers are very erudite on their space talk and interviews, so definitely check those out. Anything else at this point?
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess there's always space for Mars-related joke. Like, your mama is so fat that when she jumped into the pool, NASA found water on Mars. You want some more?
Wow.
These are gold.
Oh, they're gold, are they? Okay.
Well,
They must be gold because the first joke already went into your mama territory.
How does Earth and Mars schedule a vacation? They plan it. If Elon Musk's space company establishes a Mars colony and you have a girlfriend on Mars but later break up because of long distance, she'd be your SpaceX.
Wow.
Why is Bruno Mars not called Bruno Snickers? Because he has no nuts. I think we've dropped the joke quality at this point.
I don't even get that one.
Well, because Snickers has nuts. And
Yeah, the Mars, the candy bar, does not.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, we're talking about the candy bar. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Well, dear listener, would you recommend these films in case you watched them and hopefully had fun with it? What did you think? Leave us a message on our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. On the Facebook as the Flick Lab Podcast, or on Twitter with the handle The Flick Lab. Anything else, or you want to close and throw the lab coats to, I don't know where, to perchlorates?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Karri. As usual, you can follow me on Twitter at Karri Ojala, where the O is 0.
I'm Zach. You can follow me on Twitter at ZacharyPen48.
And I'm Henrik, and you can follow me into that dumpster on the dark alley.
And you can also check us out on at theflicklab.com. Our theme music created by Nick Grivel. This episode edited by me as per usual. In the next episode, and I can't believe I'm saying this, guys, we will finish our James Bond marathon with No Time to Die. Due to coronavirus, we had to wait for over 1.5 years to continue our Bond marathon. Now finally, the film is coming out. As our listeners might know, back in 2019 and 2020, we went through all the films we considered the best and the worst from each Bond actor, and a bit more. Daniel Craig's apparently last Bond film, No Time to Die, will be in theaters in most of Europe on 30th of September, and on October 11th, we will push out the No Time to Die episode. Our Bond expert Tom Frankland will join us as usual. And we will also have a a special guest, David Lowbridge Ellis from License to Queer. I will see the film at Gibraltar, and as some of you may know, this is also a location where the opening of the Bond movie The Living Daylights was shot. So I'll be there on October 29th, reporting from there live on Twitter Spaces. Stay tuned for that. So, I'm incredibly excited about all of this, so please, for the love of God, please, let this be a great film. Thank you for joining us. See you in a fortnight.
Until then.
Later. No one would have believed in the early years of the 21st century that our world was being listened to by intelligences greater than our own. That as men busied themselves about their various film podcasts, they were observed and studied. With infinite complacency, man recorded to and fro about the globe, confident of their broadcasting empire over this world. Yet, across the gulf of space, other podcasts, vast, cool, and unsympathetic, regarded the Flick Lab with envious eyes, and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. I was wondering how many episodes we were going to get through before the word panspermia was used, and I am so glad it was only 3.